So before I work out, let's do this Sarah Richardson's national best-selling author, One Night with a Cowboy. And right on the cover, one of my other favorite authors, Jennifer Ryan, posted, "Filled with humor, heart, and love. This page-turner is a one wild ride." By Jennifer Ryan, the New York Times best-selling author on the hometown cowboy. It was an extremely heartfelt ride, a very emotional ride. You see the heroine struggle because she's went through a bad marriage. She didn't think that her kids knew she went through a bad marriage, which were also his kids as well. But ironically, the kids knew everything, because a marriage, when you have children and there's kids involved, you should never fight in front of them, but yet you should never hide what's the real emotions that's going on and taking place. And in this book, Olivia and Wes, or no, Wes is the new father figure to be. Olivia and Ryan are adorable children, and they actually want what's best for their mom, who has had a bad relationship with their dad, and who their dad put the whole family, whether he knew it or not, through a living hell. And he was in the military, and it was just an emotional roller coaster of a ride. But let's read the back of this, and then I have a few pages to share with you and a book rating to give you. And something tells me you'll want to stay tuned. So, a Silverado Lake novel. This wandering cowboy is ready to hang up his spurs. But can he convince the love of his life to settle down with him? Rodeo cowboy Wes Harding left his family ranch after one reckless mistake cost his loved ones everything. But when his sister needs help, Wes agrees to come home and take the reins of their big ranch's charity event. However, he didn't plan for his distracting, stubborn co-hostess. One kiss with Thea throws his world off balance and has Wes craving the family he's never dared of dreaming of. Single mom, Thea Davis, doesn't have time for the inexplicable curling attraction to Wes Harding, no matter how well he listens or how sweetly he treats her children. Her focus needs to be on holding her fragile family together, but the more time she spends with Wes, the more attached she and her kids become. With a week drawing to a close, can Wes convince her to give love a chance before she leaves Silverado Lake and him behind for good? So let's read the little snippet inside the book here that wets your whistle, lets you know a little bit what it's about. Wes stepped closer, and without thinking, Thea let her head tip up toward until her forehead rested on his chest. She was too weak to fight the pull, and she felt to him, or maybe she was strong enough to act on it in this moment. After a second, Wes's arms came around her, enveloping Thea in a warm and closeness that hadn't let herself experience for so long, for a lifetime. Her heart pounded harder and harder, her knees softened again. She raised her head to peek up at him, to see into his eyes again. They drew her in, so full of something that she never even seen before. Scars, regret, but also a flicker of hope that kindled into hers. Thea couldn't look away. She couldn't step away. The hammering of her heart pushed her to move, to touch her lips to his. The contact knocked the wind out of her, bringing a small whimper hurtling up her throat. Wes startled, pulling away from her, but then his gaze locked on hers and everything paused. A year seemed to pass between them all at once, and her chest burned with each shallow breath. What had she done? What was she doing? Thea did not know, but she needed more. Okay, now that's to wet your whistle. Now here's the first part that I found interesting, and I'm going to share with you. It's on page 135. The emotion she showed so freely pried his heart open a crack. He never let himself feel anything too deeply. He never let himself say any of those words out loud, but now he couldn't seem to hold them in anymore. My dad was right about me. Everyone had been right about him. He hadn't taken anything seriously enough. He hadn't been reliable. I was too selfish, and I passed up the last opportunity I had to spend time with my father. Thea slowed the car and guided it onto the side of the road. She faced him fully, her eyes looking onto the deepest part of him, as though she was still searching for the good. You told Ryan, your dad said that all he ever wanted was for his kids to be happy. I heard you say that. He told us that all the time. Whenever Wes messed up, his dad would always say, I want you to be happy, son, and things like this won't help you find long-term happiness. Then maybe the best way to honor his memory is to let go of the questions that burden you so much. Thea reached over and slipped her hand into his, threading their fingers together, flooding him with warmth. He couldn't remember the last time someone held his hand, and maybe when he dated around in high school, since there was a cool form of PDA back then, but he never felt such power to come from a single touch. Maybe the best thing you can do for your father now is build a life full of happiness. Okay, moving forward. Page 141 is a short little paragraph. Once again, he wondered how this happened. How had they gotten here? One day his sister had been completely healthy, and the next day she had to fight for her life. He'd known how short life was, how quickly the rug could be pulled out from under you, but he'd forgotten life is short, son. That's why you have to make the minutes count. That had been one of his father's favorite sayings. Had he made the minutes count? Again, I'm trying to entice you to want to read this book on your own. Just give you little short tidbits here of not only seeing Thea's hurt past, but seeing the hurt past of Wes. On page 145. Thanks, Toby gave Wes a hug and shook Thea's hand again. It means a lot to have you two here, really. I'm glad we could be here. Her eyes got all teary. Seeing the emotion in the two tough cowboys made it hard to keep her composure. Keep us posted, Wes called as his brother-in-law hurried away. You'll be the first to know anything, Toby promised before he disappeared around the corner. Looks like you've got quite the setup here. Wes came around the other side to the couch and sat, his shoulders slumping. Watching the sunset always made things seem a little bit better. She sat next to him. It's a good reminder that even though terrible things happen sometimes, there is still beauty, something bigger out there to put your hope in. At least that's what the always thought when it happened to be sitting on the back deck at dusk. Yes, thank goodness for that. Wes focused his gaze out the window. Thea let a few seconds of silence sit between them before she asked, How does Jane look? Not so great. He turned his face to hers, and she could see a tick work through his jaw. I'm sure it wouldn't be easy for anyone to see their loved one in ICU, but I bet she knew you were there. I hope so. He stared at the floor. Jane and I, we used to be close, but after Dad died, everything fell apart. I used to watch out for her when we were kids, but when we hardly talked for years. Thea said nothing, simply moved her hand to cover his. The feel of his skin against hers sparked a fierce desire to pull her closer to him, to take her away some of this burden, to make him happy. Her heart startled at how strongly she wanted to abandon herself to feel those feelings. If she doesn't wake up, he shook his head, I just don't know. I should have helped her through that time after the accident, but I was just too consumed with my own guilt. Yes, guilt had a way of haunting a person. She knew that firsthand, but you're here for her now, Thea reminded him, and that's what she'll always remember. Wes leaned back against the cushions. His eyes were on her. How do you always know the perfect thing to say? Oh, I assure you, I rarely know the perfect thing to say. Like when she told him that kiss was a mistake, for instance, sitting here with him, away from everything else, away from responsibilities and reminders of her past. She didn't want that kiss to be a mistake. She didn't want to pretend that she wasn't dying to kiss him again. Thea held her breath and searched his eyes. Wes' postures changed. He sat a little taller as she, though hyper-aware of her feelings. You always seem to know the perfect thing to say to me, he murmured in that deep vibrato that resounded all through her. Because her heart responded to him. She wasn't even sure why. On paper, she and Wes made no sense, but the man had a hold on her heart. Okay. Next two pages. Page 161 and 162. Don't you, quote, look great, end quote, me? Her eyebrows, a sure sign of niceties, were over. You spent the night with Thea last night. He should have been ready for that. Wes shot his brother-in-law a look. Traitor. Toby shrugged. You know how persuasive she can be. She dragged it out of me. Sure she did. Listen, Buster, his sister pointed at him. Another bad sign. Thea is my friend. She's not some hottie from out on the road. She's got 2 kids. As if he wasn't aware of all that fact. First of all, hottie? Who even uses that word anymore? And second, I know Ryan and Olivia, and I know how amazing Thea is. I know she's smart and dedicated and hardworking. He could keep listing off a woman's attributes, but he decided to stop there. You don't have to worry about her getting too attached to me. She only wants to be friends. She told me that herself this morning. Jane's eyes narrowed as she studied him. But you want more. Oh my God, you really like her. I like her. He didn't argue, but it didn't matter how much he liked Thea. I'm not sure what she wants for herself or even for her kids. I'm not grounded enough for her. I'm not dependable enough. She probably would rather have some guy with a desk job who works 9 to 5 and will be home on the weekends. And maybe that's what she deserves. Maybe that would be better for her and her family. A desk job? Toby looked disgusted. I can't imagine anything worse. That's because Toby was like him. He liked to be out on the road. He liked the adventure of it, the challenge. The rodeo circuit had been Wes's life since he was 18 years old. He hadn't known anything else, but for the first time he had wanted to. 3 months ago I would have agreed with you. Jane was no longer scowling at him, but that's not true anymore. You are dependable. Now it was his turn to raise his eyebrows at her. She always acted like he couldn't handle any responsibility. I'm not kidding. His sister put on her serious face. Look at you. You gave up the chance at a promotion to help us out, and you're here now, and you could have left when August got to the ranch, but you didn't. You know, I'd do anything for you guys. He peered at the little Charlie again. I'll do anything for her. He always will be there for his young niece, no matter what. That's the thing about you, Wes. Jane shifted as though she wanted to stand up, but then seemed to think the better of it. You'd do anything for anyone. Underneath all that wild and impulsive energy, you've always had the biggest heart. You got it from our father. Her words put him in a chokehold. All he ever wanted was to be like their father, but Charlie Harding was organized and deliberate. He always had been a planner. Wes had never been any of those things. You think that I'm like Dad? He asked, beating back emotion. You're more like him than you think, his sister said quietly. I know you would love Thea just as well, just like Dad loved Mom, and that makes matters more than your travel schedule. I'm not sure loving her would ever be enough. If he thought it would make a difference, he would learn how. He would make that his true calling. Jane took her husband's hand. Trust me, bro, love is always enough. His sister, Jane, had a very bad pregnancy, and they almost lost her and the preemie baby, but thank God both of them pulled through. Page 218 and 219. I know this probably won't help, but Wes doesn't want to leave, August said. It was a reaction. He's always been impulsive. Sometimes he acts on those impulses without thinking things through. So I've heard. She'd known what people had said about Wes, Jane included, but she'd seen something else in the man, his deep concern for other people, the way he related to Ryan. She hadn't expected to feel such a connection with him. I didn't think he'd leave, she admitted, not after what he told me he would stay. Since Dylan had rarely kept his word, it surprised her that she trusted Wes so easily. Dylan was the husband that was in the military that was killed. August is the oldest brother to Wes and Jane. August plucked a piece of long grass next to the stairs and rolled it between his fingers. When our father died, Wes didn't just take it hard. He seemed to choose his words carefully. My brother suffered a lot of trauma that day. The only way he could deal with it was to escape. That's how he lived his life ever since. And I think I know what happened with Ryan triggered that same trauma again. I know. Ryan went on a fishing trip with the fathers and Wes, and there was an accident that happened. And Wes blamed himself, when in all reality accidents happen every day. You can't always blame someone for an accident happening. They just happen. I know. She'd seen the trauma from his past. When they had driven down to see Jane in the hospital, he still lived it. But I don't know what to do for him. Maybe it was better this way. Wes had made the decision for her. She wouldn't have to worry about letting him all the way into her heart and risking failing again. She wouldn't have to put her kids through a potential breakup down the road. There might be fewer complications without Wes in her life. And yet those few moments she let her guard down, the time that she spent in his arms, what she felt for him might have been worth the complications. I'm not exactly qualified to give advice when it comes to all relationships, August said after a thoughtful silence, but maybe all he needs is for you not to give up on him. Not yet. Give up? That's what she had done with Dylan, and maybe it was okay to give up sometimes. Like her daughter had so eloquently reminded her, she couldn't change someone else's heart. But things had been different with Dylan. She had been different. She was stronger now. She knew more of what she wanted from her life. She knew how it felt to start opening her heart, and she didn't want to turn back now. He'll figure it out, August said. I know he will. It might take him some time, but he'll come to his senses eventually. I have a lot of faith in him. So do I. How could she not? He'd been there for when she needed to cry. He'd been there to tell her she was a good mom when she needed to hear it most. He respected her when she needed space. The moments they shared flickered in her mind, reminders of what Wes was so good. He was safe. He was loyal. He was wounded, too. I won't give up on him. She already wasted too much time hiding. Now it was time for her to learn how to fight for what she really wanted. Page 224, 225, 226, 227, 228, and 229. This week I realized a lot of things about myself. The biggest one being that I won't be able to find the kind of love I so badly wanted with Dylan, with anyone else, until I can be open and authentic. So thank you for giving me a space to start. Thank you for us all a space to start, Kelly said. I struggle with the same things. I want everything to be perfect, so that's the image I project. But mostly I'm a mess. Amen, Luciana sighed into her coffee. This is the parents that went to the camp where Wes's family has the ranch, and they're the camp that the Wes's family owns. It's not easy. It's not a perfect and easy life we've chosen. Cal looked to Gabe and Carlos for confirmation. They both nodded, but I think it's that imperfectionness that makes us feel need for each other even more. As spouses and as friends who can relate. Murmurs of agreement went around, and maybe for the first time in her whole life, Thea knew she wasn't alone. She had a group of friends who understood, who seen the worst and still believed the best of her. Thank you all. She dabbed her eyes with a tissue. She didn't know what she feared, but before they all sat down together, judgment maybe, but she only felt their love and concern for her. That's really all I wanted you to know. She hadn't meant to make the group session all about her. We can open it up for more sharing about how your week is gone and how your families are doing. She'd rather let someone else have a turn to cry. Hold on, Kelly raised her hand. What about Wes? You're not going to let him just run away, are you? Oh boy, here we go, Cal muttered, shaking his head. You can't let him run away. Abby grabbed Thea's arm like the very idea of her and Wes not being together made her frantic. You should call him. Call him? Carlos shook his head. No, you don't want to call him. Thea gaped at them. If she didn't know any better, she'd think the whole group had been discussing her and Wes's love life behind their backs. Kelly gasped and stood. You have to go after him. Yes, Gabe pointed at her. Exactly. You have to make the grand gesture. Just like in that movie. He turned... What was the name of that movie again? You mean Sweet Home Alabama? His wife laughed. You hated that movie. I pretended to hate it, but I really thought, man, that lady loves that guy. Thea cracked up. You guys are crazy. But she had to admit the idea had a certain appeal. You could leave tonight. Gabe pulled out his phone and then showed up an event tomorrow, and I think he usually has to be at the arena by 10 o'clock. Looks like Amarillo's about a 9-hour drive from here. Thea did the math. If they hurried, they could be there by 11 o'clock and find a hotel, but we're supposed to have 4 more days here with you all. Her kids wouldn't want her to cut the trip short. They were having way too much fun to leave now. You can come back. Luciana jumped up and joined Kelly in front of the fireplace, and then you can bring Wes back with you. In that case, you should fly down there, Carlos insisted. Then you can drive back with him. He shrugged as if it was all settled. There's an airport in Amarillo. Gabe was tapping on his phone. Looks like there's a flight from Denver leaving at 6 tonight. Tonight? She was the most scheduled person, was supposed to zoom down to an airport, hop on a plane tonight? She couldn't tell if that was nerves of excitement buzzing through her. She would definitely have to clear with a phone call to Ryan's doctor, and what if he doesn't want us to see us? Maybe Austin was wrong. Maybe Wes ran because he didn't want to put up with the mom and her kids. Are you serious right now? Kelly looked at Cal, who finished her sentence for her. Trust me, Thea, I know what it looks like when a man has fallen in love with someone, and Wes is a goner. Oh, now Abby flew off the couch, obviously driven by yet another great idea. I'm sure August can help you out get tickets to surprise Wes. He is his brother, after all. You could show up with the kids and at the rodeo and watch him. Great idea. Luciana pulled the Thea to her feet. Let's go talk to August, and all you need to do is tell Ryan and Liv right away. If you're going to do this, you have to be at the airport in 4 hours. Thea somehow managed to stand, even with her head spinning. She let them sweep her toward the door and their plans and their excited chatter, but once they stepped outside, Kelly stopped abruptly and she faced Thea. Wait, I think we're getting a little carried away here. You need to decide if this is what you want to do. Yes, it seemed as if her heart had already decided for her. I mean, this is not something I would have come up with on my own in a million years without all of you, but I want him in my life. I want him in our lives. And he might say no, or he might not be ready for that, but she would never know if she didn't go after him for a try. For a split second, she thought about leaving the kids at the ranch. Would her son even be more broken-hearted if Wes wasn't glad to see them? Their conversation with Liv made the encouragement bloom in her heart again. No, it didn't matter what Wes said. This was her chance to fight for what she wanted. This was her chance to stand strong, and she wanted her kids to be a part of this. Kelly squealed and did a little dance. Then let's make this happen. She pointed at her husband. Your mission is to go talk to August. I'm sure he knows who Wes works for. Tell him they need to know front row tickets to that rodeo. He's great at talking his way into things. On it, Cal and Gabe and Carlos jogged down the hill. And you, Kelly spun back to her, you need to talk to your kids. Tell them the plan, make sure they're on board. Right. She was not worried about Liv. Her daughter had already made it clear how much she liked Wes, and Ryan, on the other hand, could be mighty stubborn when he wanted to be. Go, go, go. Abby patted her back, sending her off. While you discuss with them, we'll pack for you and the kids some food for the trip to Denver. Her 3 kids scurried back to the great room, leaving Thea to walk down the beach alone. The men had already cornered August near the boathouse, and Wes's brother had a big grin on his face, though all seemed to be well there now to approach Ryan. Her son stood on the dock with a fishing pole and his eyes trained on the bobber hovering on the surface of the lake. Liv set behind him, still relishing her protective sister role, apparently. You're fishing again, Thea said as she made her way to the end of the dock. I had to. Ryan kept his eyes on the water. You should have seen August earlier. He had no idea how to cast, Mom. He's a terrible fisherman. I had to show him how it's done. Huh. It seemed August had more insight into children than she'd given him credit for. That's great, honey. I'm sure he appreciated you teaching him how to fish. Well, someone had to, he muttered. Smiling, Thea sat down next to Liv. I have something I want to run by you two, and she didn't have time to beat around the bush. What would you think about taking a quick trip down to Texas? No. Ryan whirled, the lure of his fishing line zipping over their heads. I'm not leaving. We're supposed to be here for 10 days. It's been only been a few days. It had been more than a few days, but Thea didn't correct him. Liv narrowed her eyes and was studying Thea's face. A quick trip? Why? To go watch Wes in a rodeo, Thea said. Her words were indifferent as she could manage with her heart racing this way. Wait, her son set the fishing pole down and came over. We would only go watch Wes, and then we would come back here to the ranch? We could go watch Wes, and then when he'd ask us to come back with us. She held her breath until her son's entire face broke into a smile. Yes, her son nearly lost hold of the fishing pole. We have to go bring Wes back. We have to go to him. I'm in. Her daughter was grinning too. Does this mean you might actually go on a date with him? A date? Ryan jumped up and down, nearly landing himself in the lake. You're going on a date with him? You like him? I really like him, Thea confirmed. And I'm pretty sure he likes her too, Liv confirmed her brother. Her son gasped. Are you going to get married? That would be a dream come true. I could go fish all the time. I don't know, honey. She stood and pulled her boy in for a hug. If we did, that would be a long way off, but we would have to spend some time together to really get to know each other. But we might come up to the ranch more then, right? Her son pressed. We might. She knelt to his level, ignoring the possibility that Wes would tell her that he wasn't interested. She had to have faith in what her heart was saying to her. So we're doing this. We're going to Texas. Yes, Ryan grabbed Thea's hand and dragged her off the deck. Come on, let's go get Wes. I like how the kids are so innocent and so believing in love, and it's wonderful to see that. Okay. Page 232. In some ways, over the last year, he and Jane had made some strides on rebuilding the family they lost, but what would it be like to have his own family? His father's old adage came back to him. You can have whatever job that you want, son, but it'll never mean as much to you as the other people that you care about. He hadn't understood those words until he had a few heart-to-hearts with a kid who amazed him. Until he held Thea in his arms all night, until he'd seen a little bit of Olivia's resilience after he held her accountable for a bad choice. He cared about all 3 of them. He might suck at being a role model sometimes, like when Ryan was able to sneak off and nearly get himself killed, but he wanted to someday be the man those kids relied on. The man that Thea relied on. Is this Ryan kid coming today? Colin asked, stretching out his shoulders and getting loose. No. Wes swiped on his phone until the screen he found would picture that he'd taken of Ryan holding the fish. That moment had turned so fast, but he supposed that was the truth of life. Just when things were good, just when you thought it was easy, you got hit with a challenge. And instead of walking away, he had to learn to stick it out. Probably better he's not here, Colin said. You need to get your head in the game. We got to get out there. It's almost time for this thing to start. Be right there. Wes let the man go ahead without him, and he opened up his text again. I miss you too, Ryan, he typed, and I wish you all were here. If he ever had the privilege of seeing them again, if Thea hadn't written him off for good yet, he would get on his knees and tell them that he was sorry, that he was messed up and completely lacking, and would likely never be good enough for them, but none of what would stop him from trying to be a better man. He stood and secured his phone into the locker and then slipped on his cowboy hat and followed the hallway that led to the arena. The MC was already announcing the lineup for the bull riding event. Wes Crew stood along with the fence waiting for the introductions. There he is, Craig strode to meet him. You ready for this, Harding? Word is you got distracted today. I'm ready, he shot Colin a glare. The man was likely gunning for his spot at the top. I always come through, don't I? He'd been devoting himself to the job for the last several years. He knew how to get the job done, even when he wasn't feeling it. All right, then, his boss backed off. We've got a full crowd today. Make sure that they get their money's worth. We're on it. Wes gathered Colin and Daryl around him and gave him the rundown of the setup. He'd been in the center today, and they run to the flanks. Anytime the bull comes for you, feel free to add in some theatrics, but remember, rider safety is number one priority. If he gets hurt, it's on us. Both men gave a nod. As much as he didn't like Colin, at least the kid had some serious talent. He wasn't worried about either of those men messing up. The announcer called the names, introducing them to the crowd, and Wes ducked the fence, leading the way out to a quick lap around the arena, where they did their typical wave. Might as well get this party started right. As they approached the holding area, he jumped up on the fence and did a backflip, landing in his boots in a cloud of dust. The crowd went nuts for it, jumping to their feet and cheering. Wes waved one more time and then took his post by the south fence. First rider up, Scott Klein, riding Ripper. The announcer drew out of the syllables and getting the crowd all riled up. Game time. Wes gave the thumbs-up signal to Colin and then to Daryl. They were both ready. He kept his eyes trained on the bull in the chute and crouched so he could be on his toes, doing his best to block out everything he tried to get in his zone. The rider climbed up the fence and slid onto the bull's back and then gave the gate swing a wide open. Ripper was into the center of the arena, bucking his hind legs, but Scott had experience. He moved with the bull, and Wes followed on the outskirts, ready to jump in the second Scott dismounted, and seconds slowed. 5, 6, 7, 8. The rider let go, used one last buck to jump off the left, landing on his knees in the dirt. Wes was right there with him, waving his arms to Ripper's fury on him, and the bull snorted and lunged at him, his hooves skidding in the dirt. That's it, follow me. Wes jogged backward, dodging his feet left and right, making the bull's guess. Ripper got tired of the act and charged straight for him. Driving Wes up onto the fence, the crowd's noise turned thunderous as Wes balanced his boots on the top rung and waved. It seemed like the long pause bored the bull, and Ripper trotted away, following the fence back to the chute. Wes prepared to do his signature backflip off the rails when he heard his name. He heard that voice. He swung his head left and then right, searching. There was Ryan, right in the front row behind the fence, and Liv and Thea. His eyes met hers, a sense of relief that he'd never known flooded him. Without thinking, he jumped off that fence and into the stands and found himself on his knees in front of her. The crowd hushed, and then he could only imagine what Craig must be thinking. But he didn't care. He didn't care that 1,000 cell phone cameras were pointed in his direction. He didn't care that the next rider would be climbing the fence in only a few minutes. She'd come all this way, and all that mattered more than any of this. I'm sorry, he told her, taking her hands in his. You can walk away from me if you want, but I swear I will never walk away from you again. Oh, what a line. Tears streamed down her cheeks. She leaned forward, her lips forming that soft smile he loved so much. You have no idea how glad I am to hear you say that. Thea moved closer, touching her lips to his, and that kiss told him everything would be okay. The crowd seemed to think that so too. The cheering started again, and even the announcer got in the scene. So it appears we have a slight delay, folks. Our very own Hallmark movie unfolding in front of our eyes. It's disgusting, Ryan said with a giggle. Wes pried himself away from Thea and hugged the kid. That bull chasing you was the coolest thing ever I've seen in my whole entire life. Ryan pushed Wes back. Can you teach me how to do that? We'll see, Wes and Thea said at the same time. I didn't think it was cool. Liv's eyes were wide. I thought that dang thing was going to run you over. Nah, I'm faster. Wes gave her a quick hug, too. All right, folks, we have to keep things moving here, the announcer's voice boomed through the speakers. Next rider is up. Wes shuffled back to Thea. I have to get back to work. Yes, you do. She kissed him once more, but we'll be waiting for you right here when you're done. Wes held her gaze as long as he could before he had to turn around and hop the fence back to the arena. For the next 2 hours, the seconds dragged by like years. Somehow he kept his focus, even with his gaze constantly drifting back to Thea and Ryan and Liv. Knowing they were all there filled him with energy that was new, and it seemed to pay off. After the last rider had tested his luck, Craig came to find him in the locker room. You killed it out there today, and that stunt with that woman, brilliant. That wasn't a stunt. Wes rushed to pull off his jersey and protective vest, shoving them into the gear bag. Well, whatever it was, the crowd loved it. His boss clapped him on the back. The job is yours this season. Lead at every event I've got contacted. I'll let you know. He had to talk it over with her. Thea, he slipped into his t-shirt and threw the rest of his stuff into his bag. But you'll be in Oklahoma next week, right? The man looked panicked. That's one of our biggest events. I'll be there. He already committed, and he wouldn't break his word. But for the long term, well, we'd have to see how things worked out. See you then. Wes hurried out of the locker room and jogged down the hall to the arena. Thea and her kids were waiting for him in their seats, just as like she said they would be. He tossed his bag onto the ground and made his way down the aisle. Thea met him halfway, but Ryan squeezed in between before they could say anything to her. Wes, wasn't that the best surprise ever? The absolute best. He still couldn't believe they all were standing here with him, all three of them. It was the best sight he ever seen. How did you get here? We flew by an airplane, the kid informed him. Everyone helped us plan the surprise, Liv added. August even talked to your boss and got us the tickets. Wow, he had to call his brother right away. He owed him a thank you and an apology. But we were kind of hoping that you could drive us back to the ranch. Thea cleared her throat. She smiled, but there was also a cautious distance in her eyes. He had put it there by walking away without a goodbye. It didn't matter that he regretted it, and he had hurt her. Wes patted Ryan's shoulder. Hey, I got a few bandanas in my bag. He reached out and pulled them in, and handing one to Ryan and one to Liv. The bull riders are signing autographs right down there. He pointed in the direction of the chute. Why don't you go meet them? Awesome. Ryan bounced away with his sister not far behind, reminding him to take it easy. Thea watched her kids go, her smile fading. You have every right to be upset. Wes slipped off his hat and threw it onto his bag. He inched closer to her. I messed up, but I hope you can forgive me. I didn't know how to deal with everything. And stop. The woman's eyes held him captive. They were bright and beautiful, projecting her strength. No excuses. I forgive you. But that can't happen again. If you want to walk away, next time will have to talk to me first. I will, though he didn't plan on walking away from her again. He would make the most of this second chance. I swear to you, Thea, you will never have to wonder how much I care about you. The distance between them melted away. She wrapped her arms around his waist and brought him close, her smile softened lips drawing in, and he kissed her like it was the last time he would have that chance, savoring the taste of her, the feel of her body close to his. Thea pulled back so their lips were barely separated. I don't know how I ever could have thought this was a mistake. Her smile turned playful. You do crazy things to me, Wes Harding. You haven't seen anything yet. He breathed against her neck. We've got the autographs. Ryan edged between himself and them again. Now let's hit the road so we can get back to the ranch and fish in the canoe. I don't think that's what they had in mind, Liv said with a smirk. It looked like he and Thea would have to take a rain check. It doesn't matter what we do. Wes gathered them all in for a group hug, as long as we do it together. Continuing on. Can you see why this is a good book? I'm just giving you all a few pointers here. Hopefully it makes you want to pick this book up. Okay. Let's see. Just before 7:30, she walked them to the lawn behind the lodge where August had set up an outdoor movie screen and 7 sleeping bags. She told her kids good night and stopped by the table where August was setting out pop and snacks. "You're sure you're up for this?" She eyed the copious amounts of sugar. "How hard can it be?" She decided not to answer that. "I'll have my cell phone on if you need anything." "I won't need anything." Wes's brother held up a big bag of M&Ms. "I have all the leverage I need to get them to behave." She couldn't argue with that. "Thanks for doing this. I'm glad I can help." Like Wes, August had a genius about him that she got the sense that he would always say and do what he meant. "I couldn't be happier for the two of you." She couldn't be happier either. After taking a picture of the kids settled in their sleeping bags, she hurried back to the cabins to change into a pair of yoga pants and a sweatshirt. Real sexy, she thought, lacing up her hiking boots, but at least she'd taken some time earlier that day to fix her hair up. It had been a long time since she'd had anyone to impress. After a glance in the mirror, she added some tinted chapstick to keep her lips soft. She almost laughed when Wes knocked on the front door all formal, like he was really picking her up for a date. Thea's heart seemed to pick up a new rhythm as if she rushed through the small living room and opened the door. Instead of saying hello, she simply walked into Wes's arms and kissed him the way she's been aching to kiss him all day. "Do we have to go out?" she whispered against his lips. "We could always stay in." This was exactly where she wanted to stay, in his arms, pressed against him, only with fewer clothes on. Wes laughed as he kissed her again. "You'll like where we're going, I promise. I like this." She moved her lips along his jawline and down his neck. How had she ever thought that she could keep any boundaries with this man? "Me too," he guided her lips back to his. "But hold that thought. We have a short walk, then we can pick up right where we left off, I promise." The man had a lot of nerve to pull her back and offer his hand. "Fine," she huffed. "I guess a little walk will be okay." They stepped outside, and she was glad that she put on her sweatshirt. The air was chilly with dusk, but it felt perfect as they walked along the lake, her hand tucked under Wes's arm. Even though they were heading away from the lodge, she could hear the movie. What are they watching? "The Princess Bride." Wes guided her in front of him when the path narrowed and kept his hand at the small of her back. "A true classic." She used to have a huge crush on Wesley. "As you wish." Wes took her hand again, walking alongside her. "One of my favorite movies, too." "I haven't wished for anything yet." Warmth seemed to fill her with that tingling anticipation she was beginning to love. "She doesn't matter what you wish for," he told her, pausing in the thick of the trees. "I would give it all." Wes leaned in as though he was about to kiss her, but brought his lips to her ear for the last second. "Close your eyes." "Okay." Not that it would matter much with dark closing in all around them. She couldn't see a lot anyway. Wes threaded his fingers through hers and led her a few yards away before pausing again. "Open them." She saw lights first, beautiful white string lights stretched from the surrounding trees to the top of the white teepee. 2 flaps were open, showing off what looked like a soft mattress covered with blankets and pillows inside. In the front of the teepee was a small campfire that flickered. On both sides of the teepee was evergreen trees, hemmed them in, sheltering them in place and turning it into a private, cozy refuge. "This is incredible." She never liked camping, but this just might make her never want to sleep indoors again. "I thought this would give us a chance to be alone with no interruptions." Wes tugged on her hands, leading her into the teepee. As they both crouched and ducked inside, Thea sat on the edge of the mattress to remove her boots and then laid back into the soft comfort of the luxurious sigh. Millions of stars were visible through the gaps in the tops of the teepee. "This might be more comfortable than my bed at home." Wes kicked off his boots and eased her onto the side next to her. "I know things have been crazy since we got back." Thea turned on her side to face him. "I'm not sure that we'll ever stop being crazy. Not with kids and jobs and constant surprises." "It won't," he agreed, "but I want to take tonight for you and for me. I wanted everything else to pause so I could tell you that I'm falling in love with you. I'm falling in love with your kids, and I don't know if you have any room in your heart for me." Thea stopped him right there. "I have room in my heart." Again, for the first time in a long time. She never felt as complete as she did right then in that moment. "I know I pushed you away before, but you have to understand that Dylan and I had a very rocky marriage." She gazed steadily into Wes's eyes. It felt like she was looking into them forever. "We got married too young. I was pregnant, and I didn't think I had any other choice." There were so many other parts of her story that she would tell him in time, but now she wanted him to know one thing. "I didn't have the kind of marriage I wanted to have. We fought and ignored each other, and Never found a way to deal with our issues. Sharing the next part didn't shake her like it had before. Sorry about the computer screen going batty. Sorry. Before he left for that last deployment, I told him I wanted a divorce. Wes nodded as if he understood where her pain came from. He said nothing, but his hand found hers again. That was the last time I saw him, and I will always regret those words. They might have been true. She didn't know if she and Dylan would have ever been able to work through their problems, even individually or as a couple, but she wanted the words back. That won't happen again. I want things to be different next time. I won't take anyone for granted. I feel the same way. Wes smoothed her hair away from her cheek. We both know how quickly someone can be taken away. I won't take anyone for granted, and I won't live with regrets. Not anymore. We just have 3 more pages. Thank you for hanging in with me. This one's really short. She would still make mistakes. There would be difficult moments and hard-fought battles. But she wouldn't squander this second chance to love deeply and fully, because love was worth all its cost. Okay. And then now page 257, the moment we've all been waiting for. Thea Davis, I've been waiting for you my whole life, and I can't wait anymore. That was the plain truth of it. He wanted to make their commitment to each other official. He wanted to be there in the middle of the night when one of the kids was sick and needed him. He wanted to hold Thea into the morning hours. I want to be a family, whatever that looks like for us, whatever that means. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a single ring he found at a jewelry shop in Tulsa during the last events. It was a simple solitaire diamond, as bright as shining as the woman he loved. Will you marry me? Yes, Thea laughed through her tears. Oh my God, I was hoping you to ask me here because I can't wait either. All around them were people crying. Jane and Toby hugged his mother, somehow managed to snap a picture on her phone while still holding the baby. Wes slipped the ring onto her Thea's finger and stood pulling Liv and Ryan into their embrace. This was it. His life, everything he needed. The journey he had taken to find this woman and her children had involved years of searching, but now he could finally lay it all down and live the kind of life that would make his father proud. About the author. Sara Richardson grew up chasing adventure in Colorado's rugged mountains. She climbed on the top of a 14,000-foot peak at midnight, swum through Class 4 rapids, completed her wilderness first aid classification, spent 7 days at a time tromping through the wilderness with a 30-pound backpack strapped to her shoulders. Eventually, Sara did the responsible thing and got an education in writing and journalism. After a brief stint in the corporate writing world, she stopped ignoring the voices in her head and started writing fiction. Now she uses her experiences as a mountain adventure guide to write stories that incorporate adventure with romance. Sara lives and plays in Colorado, where she still indulges her adventurous spirit with the saint of a husband and 2 young sons. You can learn more at sararichardson.net, Twitter at Sara, SARAR_books, Facebook.com/Sara Richardson Books, and Instagram at Sara Richardson Books. And the book rating itself gets a strong 7. So that's a middle of the road rating, but it's still a good book to read and has some great points to it. So it shows a struggle on both sides, and they do overcome that struggle for him to propose and find a life as one family. Beautiful. The next story I'm reading is It's All About That Cowboy by Carly Bloom. This is the first story I've ever read by that author, and I'm very intrigued. Please stay tuned because I look for that book review tomorrow. So, love y'all. Make sure you're keeping your 3 feet of social distance, washing your hands. When you're not washing your hands, make sure that you have your hand sanitizer. You're always wearing your mask. There is no excuse not to wear that mask. Make sure that you have faith, hope, and love and joy in your heart. Lots of prosperity in the bank as well as your heart. Also, make sure you know it's better to give than it is to receive. And that the greatest form of payment is 2 words: thank you. Don't accept any form of money. And make sure that what they do is pass that gift on by helping someone else out in need. God bless. Thank you for tuning in.